going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Hills Are Silent podcast, where we like to chop it up about the games of yesterday, today, and tomorrow. I am Two-Tone the Artist.
And I am Mitch the Peach.
And let's roll into it. Another episode. Got some good topics. Mitch and I played some new games. One surprise pickup to go over. And one nice thing in the news. I always like good news. You know, there's a lot of bad stuff out in the news these days. Depressing topics, violence, all that. I think that's kind of why I gravitate towards video game news, because it's just typically awesome art being created, making the world a more beautiful place. And Hyperkin, which is a video game accessory company, I've gotten their stuff before. They make really cool things. And they have just announced they're releasing a remake of the original Xbox S controller. Now, for those that don't know, maybe too young or maybe never owned an original Xbox, the console originally shipped with this massive controller. For most people, it was not very comfortable to hold, and this controller was dubbed the Duke controller. It was great if you had big hands, but if you're a kid or somebody who does not have big hands, it was just not a comfortable controller. So they ended up eventually releasing a smaller controller known as the Xbox S controller, which was a smaller, slimmer version that was much more comfortable. It was a great controller for the time.
Yeah.
And they've since iterated on that design. The Xbox 360 controller was a evolution of that, a nicer, even nicer controller, in my opinion, one of the greatest controllers ever made. And then the Xbox One controller was an iteration on that controller. And that's an even better controller. I mean, I can switch between the 360 controller and the Xbox One / Xbox Series X controller any day. They're both amazing controllers. It was so great that they really didn't change anything when they came out with the Xbox Series X. It's basically the same controller as the Xbox One controller, at least in the design of it and how it fits in your hand.
And even nowadays, being like with Microsoft and whatnot, like I use my Series XS controller just a Bluetooth straight to my computer when I'm playing games. Don't need any wires. You know, I like that I can switch it from my Xbox to my PC.
Yeah, man, I'm telling you, Microsoft, they just got it right. So Hyperkin is making this nice nostalgic throwback to the original controller. So I've got it up on the screen now. At the moment, hasn't been a release date mentioned or what it's going to retail for. But I'd imagine probably in like the $40, $50 range. It is a wired controller, which a lot of newer Xbox, third-party newer Xbox controllers do seem to be wired. So that may turn some people off, but I mean, I grew up with wired controllers, and oftentimes at night when I'm getting ready to play games, like the battery's dead in my controller anyway, so I got this giant 15-foot controller that goes all the way from my TV to my bed, so I can still play games, but essentially I'm playing them with a wired connection, so it doesn't bother me. So they've got two colors. They've got a black one and a white one. Now, the original Xbox controller only had two triggers. Every modern controller nowadays has 4 trigger buttons, like a left bumper, right bumper, and then the 2 triggers, or in PlayStation's case, L1, L2, R1, R2. But the original Xbox controller just had 2 triggers on the back, and then it had a white and a black button on the front that were underneath the A, X, Y, and B, just for like extra stuff. I always thought that was funny. It's just like they knew making it that they needed 2 extra buttons, that they just didn't have enough buttons. They didn't have the same amount of buttons that the PlayStation controllers had. So they're like, we need more buttons. Where should we put them? Let's just put these random little buttons off to the side. And instead of just doing what's become the modern standard, which is the 4 trigger buttons for your index fingers and middle fingers. But this controller still has that random white and black button. And I'm assuming it is just duplicate functionality to the the additional triggers, because they already
So-
remade the Duke controller, and on that controller they did add the 4 trigger buttons, so it wasn't exactly like the original Xbox controller. They knew if it was going to be a modern controller, they still needed 4 triggers.
I was literally going to say that because I see in the comments here somebody goes, "I hope it has bumpers." I assume it does because they put them on the Duke controller.
Yeah, exactly. And they've only released 2 pictures, and none of them show the back of the controller, so you can't tell. But if they did it on the Duke, I can almost guarantee they did it on this.
Yeah.
And we've talked about the Duke on a previous episode. I absolutely love that controller. I have so much nostalgia for it. I got one right here sitting next to me that Mitch gave me for Christmas. So, man, that was the first Xbox controller I had. So that's the one I always played with. And the Hyperkin Duke one, I've wanted it for a long time, just for its sheer cool factor. But it is so not practical. I mean, it is kind of hard to go back to that controller these days. I'm looking, if you're watching the video, I got the Hyperkin Duke re-release up on the screen right now. And you can still get them on Amazon anywhere from like $55 all the way up to $90 for this really cool limited edition Cortana one. And that's the one I would get if I were ever to get one of these Hyperkin Duke controllers. But I don't need it. Probably wouldn't use it, and $90 is a lot.
I don't need it either, but I think I would, if I could choose one, I'd get that see-through green one. That one looks pretty slick.
Yeah, that would be my second choice. So
that green color is just a very iconic Xbox color.
Yeah, all those translucent colors. I mean, the N64 used to be released and used to have controllers in translucent colors. The console was in translucent colors. And
yeah, I had 2 consoles. I know I've talked about in a previous pod of Nintendo 64s. I had a purple one and I had the blue one, and they were both the translucent ones.
Yeah, man, those were so cool. It's just such like an early 2000s, late 90s thing to have.
Yeah.
Translucent electronics, and it's cool because you can see all the components inside of it. It makes it look more futuristic, and there was that translucent green original Xbox that was the Halo limited edition. I think it was the Halo 2 limited edition. I would love to get a hold of that someday, but again, do I need it? No. But anyway, one more thing, the Duke controller, the emblem in the center of it was an LED screen. So when you started it up, it actually did the original Xbox animation. However, it does not look like this S controller that they're re-releasing has that LCD screen. It looks like it's just simply the sticker on it that says Xbox. And then one last thing to mention, like the Duke controller, which we covered on a previous episode, they also re-released the Xbox 360 controller, which was crazy to me because that controller, in my mind, is not that old. Yes, now that I think about it, that controller is 19 years old, but man, the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3 era, it just doesn't seem like it was that long ago.
Yeah, these look really clean too. They even kind of I like how the Xbox button in the middle looks. It almost looks like it's stainless steel.
Yeah,
it just looks a really clean design.
Yeah, another cool one. But again, I still have my original Xbox 360 controllers, so I can't see myself dropping $50 on a.
Especially when you can get these controllers, like the newest of the new, on sale for like $30 sometimes.
Yeah, and again, these ones are wired only. Still, yeah, would gravitate more towards a wireless Xbox Series controller for the same price, even though...
There are plenty of people who are controller collectors, though, and people that just want it for nostalgia, so there's 100% a market for these.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember seeing a YouTube video of this guy that was a hardcore Xbox controller collector, and he had a whole room dedicated to Xbox 360 and Xbox One. This is some years back before the Series X had come out, and he just had this table that was like a shrine, and he had every single Xbox 360 controller variant ever released. And I'm telling you, there were like 100 of these.
I mean, there was a time where it seemed like every major release had its own Xbox controller to pair with it. Like there's like, oh, it's the designed Forza Motorsport 7 controller, or every Halo iteration that's come out. So yeah, I mean, I can't imagine how many this person has.
Yeah, and the Xbox One had just came out when I was watching this video, and he had already started amassing all of the Xbox One controllers that had been released up to that point. But anyway, man, controllers are always awesome, but at the end of the day, I only need like one or two. So
yeah,
don't think I'll be picking these up, but would love to have them nonetheless. All right, man. Well, didn't you just recently beat another game?
I've beaten a few, but there's one I've been waiting for you to finish, and in Resident Evil 4 remake, but we will get to that at some point.
I'm almost done. I got three. I'm on the last 3 chapters.
All right, I love to hear that. But yes, I have been playing the game, and as people know, I like to play my Switch in bed, and this is kind of the perfect one to dive into, and I was very pleased with it. And this one is called Paranormasight, The 7 Mysteries of Honjo. And it is a very random name. It is a very long name. But it is a fantastic visual novel that was developed by Zine and published by Square Enix. And it was released in early 2023. So as Mike had told me off the pod, I play a lot of random games, and this one is no exception. But since it was published by Square Enix, I kind of figured, I saw some reviews, I saw the art style, and I was sold on it. And I think I got it on sale for like $12 or $13, so it wasn't even like anything crazy as far as a purchase was concerned. So kind of like I said, like I actually snapped me playing this game to a few of my friends because I was drew in by the art style. The art style is so unique and so cool that I sent to my friends, and they're like, oh, are you going to talk about this on the pod? Like, this looks awesome. Like, what is this game? Like, people didn't know what it was. And yeah, so essentially it took me about 10 to 15 hours to beat. It is a visual novel with some light puzzle elements, which was perfect for me, like playing late at night in bed, because it has a lot of creepy elements to it. Essentially, you play as 5 separate characters who you bounce around between each of their flowcharts. So like you complete one character's portion of a flowchart, it unlocks more options for the other characters. The story centers around an urban legend called the 7 Mysteries of Honjo. Essentially, one night, several people are afflicted with a deadly curse that are triggered different, and they're controlled by holding onto a curse stone. So these people essentially all got these curse stones one night, and the legend is if somebody has all 7 of the curse stones, you can bring somebody back to life. So it kind of becomes a situation where each character you control is a curse bearer, and they have different motives on collecting each of the curses. So some of them want to bring somebody back to life. Others, like you play as a detective, and he just wants to collect them so he can end, so people aren't using these curses to continue killing people. Because in order to use each 7 of these curse stones, they all have to have soul dregs in them. So each of these curse bearers collects soul dregs by using their curse on people and killing them. So pretty dark, pretty scary. Like, as I said, like a great one for me just to play before bed, just like chilling and in the dark late at night with my TV off and just my Switch. So as you're going around, certain choices that you make can impact each of these 5 control characters. So they each have it's a story flow chart. There's different endings, and you can get them all through one playthrough, which is nice. But if you make the wrong choice or do something wrong, your character will die, and you have to revert to the last portion or the last scene of this flow chart. So it's kind of neat. It's a lot of trial and error because you're trying to figure out what each of these 7 curse stones do, because once you kind of figure out how each of these curse stones are triggered, that helps you get through the story. So kind of a spoiler. So anybody who wants to play this, maybe fast forward a little bit, or I'll try to keep it light. But as I mentioned, each of these curses are triggered by doing certain actions. So for example, this is a really cool mechanic that I didn't even realize what was going on until I actually looked it up, because I couldn't figure it out. So there's one curse that you simply unleashed by just hearing the curse. So if the person says, the curse gets unleashed and you hear it, your character dies. So while there's no voice acting in the game, if you go into the literally go into the pause menu of a game, there is a volume slider for character voice. And in order to continue through the story, all you had to do was turn that slider down, and then you could progress through the story. So it was kind of like a fun puzzle of like being self-aware, and like you actually have to go into the game's menu and turn down a voice slider that doesn't exist, because there is no voice acting in the entire game.
So did you figure that out, or did you have to consult a guide online?
Oh, I consulted a guide 100%. Yeah. How else would I have known,
Yeah.
So like, while it's a really like clever like idea and a cool thing, like I can't imagine how many people really got that on their own.
Yeah, I bet a lot of people got frustrated and just put the game down and said, forget it.
Yeah, I was kind of frustrated for a while, and because it's pretty early on in the game, you have to do that. And they're trying to teach you like, hey, like there's going to be different mechanics that you have to use to progress, to not die by a curse. But I mean, that one was probably the most difficult one of all of them, and it was very early on in the game.
In hindsight, after you figured that out, were there any hints that you went back to and like, oh, they were trying to tell me to do that? Or is it just completely obtuse where you had no idea that that's what needed to be done?
I don't think there was anything that was like really like a dead giveaway. There is a narrator who kind of like tries to tell you like, hey, like, he kind of tries to guide you into a way that you have to like think outside the box, but there was nothing that was like super, I don't know. There wasn't anything that was a dead giveaway for me. I'd have to go through it again and like see, but yeah, nothing that really triggered my my thought process there. So I looked it up and I was like, oh wow, this is insane. Okay. But like, there's one other one where you have a character who can light you. Their curse is they can light you on fire if you have any sort of flammable device on you. So my character had a lighter in his pocket for, because he smokes. And you don't realize that this person's curse does that until you play other characters and you realize, oh, this is what that curse does. So you can go back into the flowchart and the storyline, and then you can go back to this character and say, oh, I know exactly what your curse does. But before I talk to you, I'm going to take this lighter and I'm going to throw it into the water. And so you just see your character taking it out and throwing it in the water, and the curse bearer just has this look on his face like, how did you know to do that? Like, kind of thing. It was a pretty cool moment of like, them not realizing that the player, am controlling everyone, kind of thing. So like that was a really cool thing. Like the story itself was fantastic. It was creepy. All the characters are so well designed. They all are very unique in their own rights. Just a lot about people having different motives of trying to gather these curses and do what they want with it, and all of them coming together kind of at the end to have a pretty epic conclusion. And it was cool going through and seeing each of the endings that you could get, because they kind of offered a little bit of different what if scenarios, like what if this person got all the curses, or what if this person did, or whatnot. So honestly, like probably one of the better, as somebody who loves Phoenix Wright and playing visual novels like that, is one of my favorite ones is Phoenix Wright. The Seven Mysteries of Honjo really stacks up well against that. It was one of the better ones I've ever played. But yeah, I played it on Switch. It is on Steam. I think it's also on consoles. So it's pretty much everywhere, and it's usually not very expensive. I feel like I said, I got it for maybe 10 to 15 bucks, and it was 10 to 15 hours to complete like all the endings. So I think worth your money, worth your time. A really fun playthrough, and it's just like it's a visual novel. Like it's just it's a lot of obviously like chill reading and like light puzzles. So yeah, I had an excellent time with it. I'm glad I got to share it because yeah, it is really cool, and the art style is what brought me in, but everything else around it really kept me in.
Yeah, awesome, man. Yeah, it has kind of a old VHS tape anime look to it.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because like every time you like you progress in the story and you go back to the flow chart, it turns off a TV like it's a CRT TV kind of thing. It makes that little like that sound like you're turning it off, and then it bounces back to the flow chart.
Yeah, man, definitely. The look of those old TVs and what they did to the picture was a vibe in of itself. So, anyway, cool. Sounds like a cool game. We've talked about visual novels before. Sometimes they can be great, just relaxing games to play at the end of the night. And the fact that this was published by Square Enix, I swear, man, almost everything Square Enix puts out is quality. There's a few publishers that I know if they're releasing the game, it's going to be good. And that's typically Square Enix and Capcom.
I totally agree. Yeah, and that's another reason why it drew me in, because it had the Square Enix stamp of approval, basically.
Yeah. All right, well, as you mentioned, I'm still playing through Resident Evil 4. I'll finish that up this weekend so we can talk about that on the next episode. I did have one game pickup I wanted to go over. It was my very last game purchase of 2023, but I just got it the other day, and that's because I ordered it from Limited Run Games, which we've been talking about a lot on this podcast the past few episodes. And with Limited Run Games, you pre-order the game and then you don't get it till like 3-4 months later because they have to finish the pre-order window, actually print them up, and then ship them out afterwards. But you knew what I got. You and I were talking about it. I told you I was going to keep it a surprise, and you were just happened to be perusing through the Limited Run Games, and you were like, "Did you pick up that Quake 2?" Man, spoiling it before the podcast episode. Yes, I snagged the remaster of Quake 2. Got the PS4 edition. I had picked up their Quake 1 remaster. I love Quake. And I have the very original Quake 1 and 2 and 3 on PC, on disc, but they're not always the easiest games to get running on modern PCs because they are older games. And these remasters are amazing. Even this, especially this second one, not only does it include a remaster of Quake 2, but it also includes a remaster of Quake 2, the Nintendo 64 game, which was slightly different than the original PC game. So it's basically like two games in one. With Limited Run Games, I appreciate that they still have manuals in the game that show the items and the characters and stuff like that.
They're just so detailed on everything, man. Like I'm so impressed by everything that they do.
Yeah, me too. I mean, they care about it. They know that part of the experience of purchasing a game back when we were kids was like getting it in your hand, holding it like, man, I'm about to take this home, play the crap out of it. And
it's nice to see that that they know there is a market for us physical collectors. Meanwhile, people like Best Buy are taking all their physical merchandise out of their store. But I'm glad that stuff like this exists to keep the physical media going strong.
Yeah. I mean, Quake 2 was made, man, like 30 years ago. And just, it's a beautiful thing that it's been remade. Even prior to this, there was a lot of fan mods that modernized it. But, got this forever. It is local co-op, which is amazing. It's harder and harder to find local co-op games these days. And I enjoy the fact I own it. I played through the Quake 1 remaster on Game Pass, and it was so good, man. But eventually they're going to take it off Game Pass. So I was like, I want to be able to come back to this game time and time again. If I have people over, I want to be able to play co-op years down the line, just like today. Me and my buddy James, we get together, we play PlayStation 3 games that are split screen. It's like, I do go back to these games, and if they're couch co-op, I gotta have them, man, because I'll come back to them time and time again. But anyway, this was my very last game purchase for 2023. Also, limited run games, they sell these crazy over-the-top collector's editions, which can be kind of pricey.
Yeah.
But if you just want the base game, just in a regular game case, they're typically only $40. So even when they first put them on sale, they're cheaper than the average game that comes out brand new on wider releases, which is awesome. But anyway, so as I mentioned on the podcast before, I do get games, but I usually get them on steep discounts, and I'm smart with my money. And I advise all our listeners to be smart with their money as well. And, I'm debt-free, have been for a while. Like, I'm not purchasing stuff and putting it on the credit card. It's just, when I have extra income, it goes towards some cheap games, whatever I can find a good deal on. But having said that, my last year's New Year's resolution was to not drink alcohol the entire year. And I managed to do that.
That's
Rarely
impressive.
enough, I actually stuck to one of my New Year's resolutions. In all of 2023, I did not have any alcohol. And yeah, like my early 20s, I drank a lot. So much so that I would say I definitely had alcoholism and struggled with that. And then in my late 20s, I got it under control and got to a point where I was only drinking socially. And then in my early 30s, man, I got to a point where I may drink like once every 2 months, once every 3 months. So I was only drinking a couple times a year anyway. And every time I did, I felt like absolute crap. It's just like, I don't know if the long years of drinking alcohol took its toll on my body, and my body can't take it anymore. I don't know if it's just because I'm getting older, but either way, I made the conscious decision that I'm done. I'm done with alcohol. Like, let's just cut it out completely, and let it be that. And I feel healthier because of it. I lost a few pounds that year, and I think it was largely attributed to just completely cutting alcohol out of my diet. And this year's New Year's resolution is to buy less stuff. So every year, just try to iterate, be a little bit better person, get a little bit better habits, break a few bad habits. So that is what it is. This is my last 2023 game purchase. I think there's going to be way less game purchases this year, and other stuff that I randomly buy that ultimately isn't absolutely necessary to my life. I got a whole library of games to go back to and play, so it's not like I need any new games. But you hear me say this now. So, audience, if I have a giant pickup video, feel free to call me out. I'm totally okay with that. I can take it. But anyway, that's the goal, man. Just be smarter with money, which I advise everybody to do.
Yeah, I could definitely take a page out of that one. I also am debt free though, and usually use a lot of my excess money to buy the physical media that I like to collect, which is fun. I think my New Year's resolution for gaming wise is to play a game to completion before I come on the pod and give it a review. I think I got good at that by the end of the year, but I keep going back to my Starfield, my original hype around Starfield, and I didn't like the game as much toward the tail end, or I guess as I kept going through it. I put a lot of hours in, but I feel like I want to give a game a full shot before I come to the pod and discuss.
Yeah. Sometimes it happens, though. Sometimes a game starts out strong, and then there's a legitimate reason not to finish it. I remember there was a game I talked about last year that I was like more than halfway through it, and I was ranting and raving about the game. And then the last like quarter of the game was so brutally difficult And it was an old school game, so it had that old school difficulty. It did not have good checkpoints or anything, or quick saves or anything like that. So it's like every time you died, you had to start all the way back over at the beginning of the level. And it got to a point where I got stuck on a level and I played it so many times. I'm like, I'm not just going to sit here and spend tens of hours trying to perfect these last 3 or 4 levels just so I can beat this game. And I was like, that's it. Same thing with your example of Starfield. Like, sometimes it's just like, I'm the type of person I always want to finish when I started, but sometimes games, it's just like, forget it, man. I'm ready to move on to something else.
Yeah. With Starfield, I feel like I was just too far in to like be like, all right, I gotta finish it now. Like, at some point, like, but yeah, I totally agree. There are definitely games where I've played, a couple hours and I'm like, all right, I've got so many games, like, I can't be wasting my time if I'm not enjoying myself.
Yeah, especially like open world games and ones that where it gets to the point where you realize you're just doing the same thing over and over and over again,
Right.
or they're real grindy. It's just like, whatever, man. Right?
Main reason I stay away from Ubisoft games these days, because it is the repetition of the same thing over and over and over.
Yeah, don't get us wrong. Ubisoft games are fun, but they are just, it's a lot of the same sometimes, or most of the time.
Yeah.
All right, so speaking of playing new games, I stumbled across this super random game that I had Mitch and I play last night, and it's actually 2 games. So, just some background story. I had a buddy I went to college with who had a YouTube channel, and just a few days ago I was going through my YouTube subscriptions, because I'm like, let me unsubscribe to some of this stuff. Like, my feed's getting too busy. Half of the stuff I don't even watch anymore. It doesn't pertain to my interests anymore. And I came across his channel, because I was subscribed to it. And I asked myself, I was like, I wonder if he's posted any new videos. And he had not. He hadn't posted anything in years. So I think he's basically abandoned his YouTube channel. But when I was looking through the videos he did post, the start of his channel was him posting gameplay footage of him playing this free-to-play game called Combat Arms. And it's a free-to-play first-person shooter that I have never even heard of. And when I was looking at the footage, it totally looked like a Counter-Strike clone. And I love games released in like I love all games, old games, new games, whatever, but I definitely think one of the golden eras is like the mid-2000s. So, and this was a free-to-play game released in the mid-2000s. So Mitch loves Counter-Strike. I've also very much enjoyed Counter-Strike 2, but don't play it that often anymore. And I love like old first-person shooters from the mid-2000s. So I'm like, let's check it out. So while looking into the game, I realized that it actually was 2 games. And I think the original one released in 2008, Combat Arms, and then they upgraded it and then called it Combat Arms Reloaded with an overhauled game engine. And then they re-released the original game as Combat Arms The Classic. So both of these games you can download and play for free on Steam. So we started with the Classic Edition because I wanted to see where it all began. And then after we got our feet wet in that, we then switched over to the Reloaded game to see what the differences were. So we're going to cover both games, starting with the Classic one. Before I give my first impressions, Mitch, what were your impressions on this game? And from a free-to-play game standpoint, from it trying to copy Counter-Strike and maybe other games to how the actual gameplay was, like, what were your thoughts on this?
So I'll be positive first. I think I understand why people gravitated toward this game a bit, and I understand why people are still playing it to this day. It is very much, they do take a lot of elements from Counter-Strike, but I think the first gripe that I have to go over that you would agree with me is, man, that menu is really busy. There is a lot of stuff going on in that just right when you launch the game. Like I was so lost at first.
Yeah, and I've talked about before that I just can't stand free to play game menus because it's information overload.
Well, yeah, because it's like claim your daily reward, claim your weekly. Here's the daily challenges, the weekly challenges. Here's XYZ seasonal event going on. Here's this. Like, do you want to pay real money to buy a gun? Here you go. Do this. Like, yeah, it was a lot to soak in right out the gate, and so that I guess that was my first main gripe. I think afterward, I mean, as far as the gameplay elements are concerned, I mean, it was a very smooth shooting experience. I just feel like I was unprepared for every game that we played. Mainly because like you have to get guns before you join into the map, and I feel like obviously I didn't know any of the maps. There's some beautiful maps that they created, and they're very big, as we've noticed. But I feel like every game that we went into, I'd be like, all right, I'm gonna switch it up. I'm gonna bring in the sniper this time, or I'm gonna bring in a rifle or a submachine gun. I feel like I had the wrong gun for every game we played.
Yeah,
like,
it's not
I had
like
a sniper on a tiny map. I had a submachine gun on a huge map. Like,
yeah, and it's not like Counter-Strike. Like as Mitch said, like you had to pick your guns before you go into the game. You can't just purchase your guns at the beginning of the round like Counter-Strike. So whatever you picked, you were stuck with it.
yeah. But I will say it holds up really well as far as like shooting and art style, and I mean just the graphics themselves. Like it looks good for a game that was released in 2008. I think is what you said.
Yeah, I mean it absolutely was a mishmash of other games. Like nothing about this game was original. It's basically like a whirlwind of everything that was hot at the time. It's definitely takes a lot from Counter-Strike. I mean, from the fact that you have the aiming is really inaccurate, and you have to walk or crouch to actually get headshots or do anything. The way he pulls out the knife, your character pulls out the knife, is just like Counter-Strike. Some of the gun models look almost ripped straight, and their animations look almost ripped straight from Counter-Strike. There is like a bomb defusal, there's hostage rescue, and then there's just like standard team deathmatch. The graphics, the levels look almost had like a Time Splitters kind of 2 vibe to them, or Time Splitters Future Perfect vibe to them, or like an early James Bond map look to them.
They even had a like an infection mode that was very much resembling, Halo back in the day.
It had the zombie infection mode, and it was just like it had a huge gun selection. You could earn in-game money by playing, and then that allows you to rent the guns and you could choose. I could spend $1,000 to rent the gun for a day, or like $3,000 to rent it for a week. So you never actually own the guns just playing the free game. But they had a different currency for if you actually put real world money in, which I would assume allows you to actually permanently purchase the guns. But I don't know. I didn't put any real world money into it. But there's tons of cosmetic customizations, people running around in crazy outfits and crazy accessories. The guns are really cool looking. There's tons to choose from, attachments, tons of stuff to unlock. But yeah, it felt very much like every modern military shooter in the mid 2000s, online modern military shooter in the mid 2000s rolled into one. So it wasn't bad, but it had nothing to really make it stand out. But the shooting was tight. People were really good at this game. But, we're jumping in fresh, not knowing the maps, not really knowing the ins and outs, and we were getting slaughtered.
I felt like I was shooting people, like, and I feel like I should have killed them, and I was not doing so. And then, meanwhile, people are one-tapping me every time I turn a corner.
Yeah. But since this game was so familiar, or it felt so familiar, even though I had never played it before, it definitely hit that nostalgia, because it felt like it was playing some game I played from my childhood that I just forgot about.
Yeah.
So I'm sure, and I remember reading in the comments and Steam, people were like, this game was my childhood. And had I known about this game back when it originally released, I probably would have been really into it, especially for the fact that it was free. It is a very, very solid game, even if you were to pay for it. So the fact it was free is even better. And as Mitch said, the maps were incredible. Whoever did the map design, they did a really good job.
Yeah.
The game was crazy loud. Like, we had to turn the volume down to like 1% just so we could hear ourselves talking over our microphones. And then, for some reason, in both the original game and the remake, at the beginning of every online match, just one super loud gunshot would go off. Even if you had it at 1% volume, it would just play one gunshot at 100% volume. So every time a match started, I was like, "Gah!" Just jumping. It got me every single time. Like, what is this bug that is making this loud gunshot go off every time a map loads? But anyway, then we switched over to Combat Arms Reloaded, and it's very much the same. The UI, thankfully, the menu was way cleaned up and toned down.
Yeah.
And my eyes stopped bleeding when I was looking at that one. But other than that, it's a graphical upgrade. The game seemed to run a little smoother, play a little smoother, but it had a lot of the same maps brought over from the original game. So it's almost like just an engine update with some other quality of life improvements, as opposed to like a complete different game or sequel.
And I feel like they used the Reloaded to just like steal game modes and whatnot off of games that came out later on after the classic.
Exactly. Yeah, Mitch, you want to tell them about the other game mode that they pulled straight from another franchise?
Yeah, we legitimately were playing. It was essentially Call of Duty World at War Nazi Zombies. Like verbatim, like the map, like the actual map looked exactly the same from the original World at War map, and yeah, like it was a complete rip of the Nazi Zombies.
Yeah, and not quite as good. Like, that's the thing. It's like
no.
I think the whole time we're playing this game, we're having fun, but it made me want to play other games. We were playing this knockoff zombie mode, and I'm like, this really makes me want to switch over and play some Call of Duty. When we were playing the base game, I was like, this really makes me want to switch over and play some Counter-Strike. Like, it's a great mishmash, especially if it's free, especially for the fact that it's free. But if you own all these other games like Call of Duty or Counter-Strike, like, they're just overall slightly better games.
I came out of that too, like, I think you mentioned it, like, I really wanted to go back to Unreal Tournament as well, like, because there were some elements of Unreal Tournaments, and yeah, did a good job of like taking all these assets that from all these other games and being like, yeah, I really want to go play that now.
Yeah. I remember one map even looked like Office from Counter-Strike.
Like verbatim, yes.
Anyway, do we recommend this game? I don't know. I'd say if you want to go back to 2008 and pretend like you have no money for any games and don't already own games and just want to play something for free that's a nice shooter, yes, that's kind of how I was pretending when we were playing this, that I was just a teenager again, no games, let's play this free shooter. But other than that, you're not missing a whole lot. But there are people who play this. There were about 8 to a dozen servers per game that were usually filled up.
I think it's fun that I was reading some of like the chat during our games, and you can tell it's the same people that kind of are coming back to these servers and playing, because like somebody be like, hey, what's up, such and such, like just somebody random online that they know just from this game. So it's a nice little layer there too, like where you're meeting people through games, through like the actual game chat, which like you don't get very much nowadays.
Yeah, dude, speaking of this game ripping off other games, I'm watching the end of this trailer on Steam, and they have a literally kill confirmed mode. They're even calling it kill confirmed, just like on Counter-Strike. And they're advertising it like, pick up all the dog tags after you get your kills, and whoever gets the most dog tags at the end of the game wins. Like, they're advertising it like it's original to this game.
Oh my.
But yeah, again, it's just this team that collects it's just funny to me, man. It's all modes from other games pulled into one.
It's interesting. That was like one of your friends, like main like games he's playing through his YouTube channel.
Yeah, but yeah, they got some cool gun skins, some cool stuff. I mean, it is not a bad game. It is not a bad game. I want to get that across. We did have fun, even though we got our butts kicked. pretty much every round. But yeah. Anyway, that is Combat Arms, the classic, and Combat Arms Reloaded. Two free-to-play games that are essentially Counter-Strike-esque clones that I don't think a lot of people have heard of and weren't aware of existed. All right, Mitch, any other closing words about our time playing this game?
No, it was what it was.
Exactly.
We had fun because Mike and I played it together.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not always the game, it's the company you keep. All right, well, that'll do it for this episode. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. You can find all our episodes on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts. Where else are we at, Mitch?
We are at our Twitter at Hills Are Silent. Our Instagram is Instagram.com/Hills Are Silent. Our TikTok is at The Hills Are Silent Podcast. Our YouTube, again, is at The Hills Are Silent. If you have any questions, comments, anything at all, reach out to us on our Spotify comments, our YouTube comments, or our email inbox, hillsaresilent@gmail.com. And as always, we will catch you on the next episode.